Hi, and welcome to the Quick and Dirty Romance Podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Skye McDonald, author of the Anti-Belle series.
And I'm Sarah Smith, author of Faker, If You Never Come Back, Simmer Down, and On Location.
And together we're Sarah Skye, author of the best-selling Sips and Strokes and Vibes and Feels.
Each episode will dive deep into what it's like to be a contemporary romance author. We'll talk writing inspiration, give you the inside scoop about the publishing world, chat about how we write those infamous sex scenes, and more. And then we'll pull out and wrap it up in 30 minutes or less, but we promise to leave you satisfied.
So if you haven't already read our books, be sure to check them out after you listen to this podcast and DM us with any questions or requests for future episodes. And as always, your likes, comments, and subscribes are greatly appreciated.
Yes, and today we're chatting about epilogues in romance books. And so for those of you who may not know, epilogues are a section at the end of a book, in this case a romance, usually a chapter that brings closure to the story. So they're kind of like a bonus HEA. And recently, Skye and I heard some chatter on social media about epilogues, specifically the kind of epilogues that people really love and really hate. It's a bit of a hot take. Wouldn't you say?
It was. Okay. It was a bit of a hot take indeed. And it got me to thinking a lot about epilogues and how I write them, how we write them. But before we get into that kind of hot take and what people had to say, let's first discuss what does make a good epilogue and what makes a bad one. This is an interesting question. Is there a bad? Good and bad are so subjective, Sarah. Like they're really just guidelines. But in your hot take opinion, what does make a good epilogue?
Okay, so in my opinion, and obviously this is just me, but I love when an epilogue takes place a good amount of time in the future, and it's just kind of like a build off of the HEA, the happily ever after, that's already happened in the book. And so for me, I just kind of want to see the characters fully in their happily ever after, experiencing life. And maybe that's just because I'm somebody who I just want things to be as happy and wonderful as possible in every romance that I read. I know not everybody's the same, but it's pretty simple for me. I just want it to be happy. I want to see the characters living their lives, living their actual happily ever after, and thriving and doing something that makes them happy, and showing them as a couple succeeding and just having joy. I don't know.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Joy.
What for you, Skye, what makes a good epilogue for you?
When it has, no, that's not where I want to go. When when it makes sense as an extension of the story, right? I like that, like just living in joy kind of thing. But more than that, when there's a reason to continue the story a little bit further, to get us to a place where, yes, time has passed and they are living their lives. And to that end, there's something else worth talking about, right? I think about my epilogues because every one of the Anti-Belle books, I think, has an epilogue, maybe not. The first two, Not Suitable for Work and Off the Record, definitely do, but they're both almost short stories, right? Like they're a little bit longer than like, oh, here's an extra chapter. But what they both are the proposal. Okay. So there's a little bit more to kind of lead up, and it becomes a little bit like tense, and then the proposal gets you to the next level of the HEA, basically. But I really like, it doesn't need to be long or short. If it's longer and more content that I want to read because I'm obsessed with the characters, then great. If it's an extra chapter that just gives me, like you said, a little bit more of that warm and fuzzy, right? But I think what makes a good one overall is that there's a reason to read it, and that reason is we're showing this couple falling even further, like you said, into joy.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you said that there's a reason for it happening, or there's a reason to have an epilogue, because I think a lot of times with the happily ever after, it can feel very complete, that final chapter can feel like, okay, yep, they're good. And then sometimes I just find myself wanting more. I just want to see the characters just fully in their happily ever after, like I said. So that epilogue is just like a bonus joyness. That's not bonus joy. But you're right. Like, I guess sometimes unless there's a clear purpose for the HTA or for the epilogue, it can feel kind of like more of the same. But even then, I don't care. Like, I want more of that. I want more of the joy, the happiness, the good vibes, the happy feels.
The vibes and the feels. Shameless plug. I think that one of the goals and successes of a romance is that you fall in love with the characters. So you do wish there was more. The book Hangover, I think, especially in romance, can be very, very strong because you're just so swept away, right? As opposed to maybe like a book about murder or people being terrible to each other. I mean, I loved the book Gone Girl. Okay. I almost threw the book across the room halfway through because I did not see the twist coming. Loved it. But I didn't really need to spend more time with those people. It was like, okay, wow. But in romance, like you said, it's just continued happiness. And I think that there's a lot of I think there's a lot of readers, including me, who, yeah, just want to see more of a life being unfolded. Like I'm thinking about Faker, right? And where you took it from there. And I don't want to give it away for people who are beginning their Sarah Smith journey, but the way you took the epilogue and made it such a natural output from things that had been picked up or mentioned and referenced in important key themes. I think that was really lovely. So yeah, it was just more like ensconced in happiness. But okay, then, so what makes a bad epilogue, if there is anything?
Okay, and that's a really good point that you put out, because like you said, everything's subjective. What one person loves, another person isn't going to like. What one person hates, another person could just absolutely be in love with. So for me, a bad epilogue is if there's like, if somebody dies in the epilogue, which I don't think that happens often, especially in like romance that I've read. And I'm not even thinking of anything in particular that I've read, but I've read epilogues where like a side character, it's been mentioned in passing that they passed away, and that really like bothered me. And again, like, it wasn't integral to the story. I don't want anybody to die, okay? Like, even in an epilogue, even in a fictional story where none of these people exist in real life, like that really takes me out of the joy of the moment, you know? Also, if there's some sort of like cliffhanger, I'm just not a fan. Like, in a romance, I need the epilogue to be like, you know, that these characters are going to be okay. Now, I know like in a lot of series, like romance series, the epilogue, because there are multiple couples, you need to sort of set things up for the subsequent book. So there'll be like, you know, maybe a mention of whatever, like the characters that are going to be the main characters of the next book in the series. There'll be like some leading conversations, or like, you know, some like, I wonder what's going to happen with that. But that's different to me. Like, that's different than an actual cliffhanger where you're like, whoa, wait, what just happened? Like, so pretty much anything that would negate the happily ever after is a no-go for me. Like, as long as things stay happy and joyful. And yes, if it's a series, we get those little like nuggets to lead us to read the next book. That's totally fine. It just needs to be happy. Like, for my well-being, it just needs to be happy.
Well, okay, so am I hearing you say that you don't like it if the epilogue takes the spotlight off of that couple? You know what I mean? So like, I'm thinking about Not Suitable for Work's epilogue, and in it, the spotlight is entirely on Celeste and Ben, but also in it, if you're reading it correctly, like if you're paying attention to what's happening, your question would be, what's going on with Nick? Okay. And Nick is the main character of the second book in my series, Off the Record. So I definitely did, like, if you're reading the epilogue, you should be thinking, what is Nick up to right now? But the spotlight does not track off of Celeste and Ben, as opposed to like, and I haven't really read an epilogue where it was basically all about a different character. Well, maybe I have.
Really?
I can't name the title, but I do feel like that might be a thing. where it's like, wait, whose book is this? And you're really looking more at it, like I said, the spotlight is more on the next character. And it's like, is this really an epilogue?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now that you say that, I can think of a couple books that I've read where that kind of was the direction it took. And again, like, there are no rules.
Nope.
You know, it's writing, it's creative. Like, again, what one writer does would work beautifully for them and their readership, and maybe another writer doesn't do that because they don't want to and they know that their readers wouldn't like it. But what you said, like, I loved the epilogue for Not Suitable for Work. I thought it was perfect, and I thought it was a really good setup for Off the Record, the subsequent book, Nick's book, because in a series, I think you do need to set up your next characters, and there's a way to do that without making the epilogue for the previous book feel incomplete or weird or completely unsettled. And you did that really, really well, because I was wondering about Nick, and I'm like, okay, who is he gonna like fall in love with? But I was also like, but I need to have Celeste and Ben have some happiness.
Because it's still their story. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's interesting. I have a funny thing that I have deleted from my epilogues, because I have to say, not to be too much of a prude, I don't know if I need more banging in the epilogue.
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm not sure that I don't. And please, again, for our listeners, we are in no way, like, we're simply reflecting on our preferences and tastes, right? Like, I'm sure there are many epilogues that are just nothing but banging and they're fantastic. But I feel like I've already gotten the intimacy, and I kind of just want to see what life looks like for them now. And I mean, I'm saying this because I used to put way more sex scenes in my book, and my books are steamy. Like, people are like, whoa, especially the first one, because it was my freshman release. But I cut my teeth on romance with Christina Lauren's Beautiful series, which is basically doing it every few chapters. And so my quantity of scenes was pretty high and is still pretty steamy. I mean, even our Unlikely Pairing series, there are multiple events. There are multiple sexual events in each one of them. Sounds the least sexy when you call them multiple sexual events, by the way.
I love
fornications. But I'm just saying, like, in the epilogue, I want to have already gotten my steam, right? And now I kind of want, for me, I kind of want the epilogue to be more cozy. And maybe they reference some steam that had just finished up, like in maybe Vibes and Feels. But, you know, and they can certainly be spicy, but I definitely want the focus to be on, like, kind of like what you were saying initially. What is their life like, right? Like, what does it look like now that we've gotten past the angst and the initial, like, lighter fluid sort of sparks, and now that they're people who are living their lives together, what does that look like? And I think that really is, like, I'm not saying that doing it a different way is bad, but definitely that's my favorite.
I love that. And that's a really good point that you bring up, because I'm just now realizing in most of the epilogues, except maybe one, I don't think that I've written sex in them. And I didn't even mean to do that. And the one that I did write sex in, it was actually like, it was very relevant to the story-line. So that's really interesting. Yeah, that's I didn't even realize that I did that until you just said that.
And I definitely cut a bunch of steam from my epilogues too, because it was kind of like when I was early in my writing and I was drafting these things, it was like doing it all the time. And it's like, let's pull that back. I mean, they're definitely intimate in the books or in the epilogues, but like, we don't need the full on, like, here's 4 pages of, you know, it's, I don't know. That's just a thing. How long after, is there a rule on that? How long after does it need to take place? I mean, it would be long enough to know that they have, like we've been saying, like, that they're a couple, right? Long enough to have something meaningful show up. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because again, there's not a rule. It's just whatever feels right to the story. I think for me, I like it to be somewhat in the, like, a certain amount of time in the future. So not like a month later. I want it to be like a year and a half, because I want to know that the characters have made it long term, and that they're doing well. Because, like, and okay, full disclosure, the epilogue in Faker takes place about a month after the story. So I broke my own rule in that situation, but I feel like it was relevant to the story for why it needed to be a month after. But in general, I just want it to be longer than that, because I feel like, okay, so like a month after, you're still in like the honeymoon phase. Obviously, you're still gonna like each other. You're still gonna like be having sex like rabbits all the time. Like, it's the best time ever, you know? After you make it official with the person you love, you're gonna act on those like super, you know, intense feelings, and you're gonna be into them. And that's great. But I wanna know, like, into the future, these characters are still into each other. A year and a half later, they're still okay. They're gonna live their lives beautifully. And then again, that's probably just me wanting maximum happiness all the time.
I like it. I like it. And I think that, well, okay. So we have the hot take and what's included and what's not included. And I do have one more question that I think I'd like to put to our audience. So let's talk about what's included and what's not included, including the hot take.
Yes.
That kind of spawned this whole thing. To me, I mean, I don't want to reiterate right now because I feel like we've made our points clear about what we do like. My epilogues tend to focus on proposals, and I know that there's a lot of different ways you can track with that, but most of mine do, with the exception of vibes and feels. No spoilers on it, just saying that that is not a proposal. But the idea that there are things that should not, or that are not good to have included. Sarah, do you want to just go ahead and take us there?
Yeah, so I saw recently that some people really don't like when there's a pregnancy reveal in an epilogue, and that really surprised me, because I love that. I love that. To me, is showing like, oh, look, see how much this couple loves each other. They're gonna have a baby. It's gonna be great.
I get that. I also get why people wouldn't like it, because it is the de facto concept that to be a happy couple, you need to have a child. And I know many child-free couples. I do not have a child. I know that that's a personal business for me, and my decisions on it are personal, but as it is for everyone. I remember when I was a teacher, a student asked me, they were like, when are you going to have a kid? And I told her, I was like, you should not ask somebody that, because you don't know what they're going through. Maybe they want to and can't, or maybe they don't want to. And like, it was a good teachable moment. But like, I totally get why needing to have a baby be part of the HEA is sort of presumptive and a little bit antiquated. But it surprises me that it would bother people.
Right. Yeah. Then that's a really good point. Because obviously, like, everyone's different. A lot of people find stuff to do with like fertility or pregnancy triggering for a variety of personal reasons, and I totally get that. But I guess it just surprised me how many people are like, oh yeah, I hate it when there are pregnancies and epilogues, because I've written a lot of pregnancies in my epilogues, and I don't have kids. The only reason that I did it is because it felt appropriate to the characters. Like, the characters' arc to me ended with them having a family, and not because I think having a family is the only way that you can be happy or find fulfillment. That is absolutely not true. Obviously, I do not have children, so obviously I don't think that that's true. But I just think in the context of this fictional story that I've created, it works a lot. But it was just really like, I guess I just didn't realize how many people disliked it. And it made me think like, oh, I wonder if that made anyone dislike my books, because I've written that in a lot of them.
Well, can I put some spoilers on If You Never Come Back?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. It's been out for like 2 years. If you haven't read it yet, guys, it's your fault, not ours.
Read it. But I'm going to use If You Never Come Back as a good example of that. Okay. Because that is your epilogue there. Yep.
Yeah.
But what I think is so good about that is that the crux of the story is about people who need family, right? Like, your main characters are searching for like family and connection in a way that, like, say, take for example Celeste and Ben in Not Suitable for Work. They're not searching for that. They both have very strong family units. Okay. So what you're doing is you're using like the creation of a new family as like healing right? Like there's growth and there's progress for two people who didn't think that that was really available to them. So it's not like, oh, we didn't have anything or we weren't really a couple, but now we're a couple. Like that's not it. Like I think it's a really beautiful, I think If You Never Come Back is a really beautiful example of where like that really is like a new day for this couple. And it's not like a presumption that they wouldn't have been happy without it, but it's more of like an affirmation of life and the changes that they've gone through.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you for putting it that way, because that's exactly what I was trying to convey when I wrote it. I didn't start writing that thinking that like, okay, and this is going to end in an epilogue and the main character, she's going to find out that she's pregnant. It just felt appropriate to take it there in the epilogue because that's where the story ended up going. And if you've ever read anything that I've written, family is a pretty strong element. So it shouldn't be that big of a surprise that half the time the characters end up pregnant. So
the familial bonds between like mother and daughter are always very important in your books. Also, I'd just like to know if anyone is listening and they heard some very strange sounds in the background, my dog is dreaming right underneath my chair. Not to undermine the seriousness of this conversation. But yeah, I think like your maternal bonds especially have always been super, super important. And so like even the carrying forth of that torch is something that I see as a motif, if you will, in your books, to throw out an English teacher word. But yeah, it's a makes sense kind of thing, as opposed to like a de facto, just like I said, just like, oh, well, of course they're going to have a baby because they're married now, right? Like that's not, I don't feel like that's your implication at all. And I guess I could see where that would be a little bit eye-rolly for me. Just simply because, you know, I was married and we did not have a child and we chose that, and it was fine. But I also think that, you know, a celebration of life is a celebration of life. So it kind of surprises me when people get mad about things like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I feel about that too. So I feel like weddings are really, really popular tool in romances and rom-coms, either like in the story itself or in epilogues. And I don't like weddings. I didn't have a wedding, and I know that that's different than, you know, children and having a family, but like there are plenty of things that I don't like that it doesn't take me out of the story because it's appropriate to the story, you know? So if it's a big wedding, like plot, I love it. If it works for the story, I love it. You know what I mean? Like there are a lot of things that I don't personally do that wouldn't work in my real life, but this is a fictional story. And if it works in the story, that's great. And I'm 1,000% in it. So but that's just the kind of reader that I am, I guess. And again, like not trying to be insensitive to people who don't like certain things, but like, I guess you never know until you read the book and read the epilogue and see how it turns out, if you hate it or not.
Yeah, because I definitely they're very limited, but there are a few tropes within the genre that I'm like, no, I don't like that. I just do not like it. I don't find it, it's very hard to offend me, unless you're like really working to do it. But there are some tropes, which we may talk about in future episodes, but there are some tropes that I really am like, I do not like that. I think those are poor life choices. But otherwise, it's like, sure, it's a story, I'll go with it. Or I'm not interested in the characters and I won't go with it. That's my choice as well. So the question that I wanted to ask before we finish up here, and this question I think might be fun to put as like a poll or something for readers, just, you know, our future edification. In what format, where do you like the epilogue to be? Okay, so follow me here. The options I can think of are A, at the end of the book, right? Like just, you know, star, 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 epilogue, which is exactly how we do it in Unlikely Pairings series. B, as its own content, either published or like a little short story, or available through mailing lists, signups kind of things, right? Like as a free giveaway, like where do you like to find it? Do you want it to be inside of the book, or do you like it better if it lands in your inbox as bonus content out of nowhere kind of thing?
That is a really excellent question. And I'm the same, like I would love to hear people's opinions about this because I'm I don't feel like I personally have like a hard and fast preference. I guess for ease, it's nice if it's included in the book already, so then I don't have to go looking for it. But I also kind of think it's fun when sometimes, like you said, like authors will be like, okay, I have an epilogue for this, so if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get it. And I'm always down to do that. Like, and I have done that for myself personally. I think that's what I did with Faker, because the epilogue isn't in the book on its own, so people get it whenever they sign up for my author newsletter. But I don't know, what do you prefer, Skye? You personally?
It's funny. I really think we did it right with Unlikely Pairings, having it at the end of the book. I think it neatly wraps up the story, but I have used it as bonus content for my mailing list in the Anti-Bell series. So actually, I'm kind of happy either way. As a reader, if I love the book enough, I think as a reader, I would probably need to know that it was like a series to really want the extra content. But if it's at the end of a book, I'm just going to read it. So that's an interesting thing to kind of ponder. I would really be interested to know what our readers and authors who listen thought about this. Because I think that the important thing to remember, one of our goals here is talking about what it's like to be a romance writer. And so for especially people who are aspiring romance writers, I think the kind of biggest takeaway is epilogue, no epilogue, baby, marriage, whatever. Just make it your own, because there's really no rules. It's just kind of whatever you see, like as Sarah was saying, is like the natural outproduct of this couple's personality. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Just sort of globally. But it's a fun thing to think about, especially if people have very strong opinions on things. So yeah, let's figure out what our audience likes. We'll put it up on like poll on Instagram or something. So be sure to be checking out our stories. And on that note, that was good for me. Was it good for you, Sarah?
Hell yeah, it was good for me.
Thank you all so much for listening. If you like what you hear, please do leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you haven't already read our books, they are Sips and Strokes and Vibes and Feels by Sarah Skye, Not Suitable for Work, Off the Record, and Nemesis by me, Skye McDonald, and Fakers, Simmer Down If You Never Come Back, and On Location by Sarah Smith, and the very soon to be released The Close Up, also by Sarah Smith. You can find us on Twitter as author Sarah Skye and on Instagram as author Sarah Skye. I am on both Twitter and Instagram at writer Skye McD.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at author Sarah S. We love to hear from you, so reach out and DM us with any questions or requests for future episodes.
Thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.